right, we are here at my tiny worm bin, and today we are going to talk about the 4 different ways I harvest my worm bins. So in this bin lately, we have been doing the migration method, and that is the method that I'm going to set up today. But we also have our continuous flow bin harvest that we use. We also sift our outdoor worm bin, and then I also use the agitation method in our vermi hut. And the last time we were in here, we put some cardboard down here and we decided not to put the plastic on because we wanted to dry out our castings a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just kind of brush them to the side, and then I'm going to take all of this out so we can set up our zone for our migration. So we'll just put some paper towel down right here, and then I'm just going to gather all of this material, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it in the zone that we're going to put shredded cardboard and some more various food scraps and our amendments, because we're going to have the worms travel over to that area. So let me just gather this stuff up and we'll take this out of the bin while we explore the contents. So while I'm gathering this stuff up, let's talk about one of the other ways that we harvest, and that is through my continuous flow bin, which is my urban worm bag. And what happens with the urban worm bag is you put the food on the top and the worms are attracted to it and travel up towards the food. And as they eat the food and you put more and more food on top, all the castings travel down towards the bottom. The worms in their natural habitat live in the upper layer of the soil, or really the duff layer, where they're eating and decomposing leaves and other things that have fallen on the ground. So it uses the natural way that worms work to your advantage. And all you do is you go to the bottom of it and you open up the little bladder they have there, and out comes the vermicompost. All you have to do is kind of reach your hand up there and scratch it a little bit, and the worm castings fall straight down. It really is a very effective way to harvest really big bins like the urban worm bag. Now we are going to take these out and we're going to revisit these in a little bit. So let's dig in here and see how these castings look. And right away we're seeing some great worms in here. Look at that. I love the worms in this worm bin. These are all red wigglers and they have just an absolute beautiful color, kind of a deep purple on their top sides, and they're a little bit more pale on the bottom. But when we were in here last, we gave them a pretty decent feeding. In fact, the first thing we did was lay down some dry shredded cardboard followed by celery stalks. Then we added in some mushy peach parts, some pepper tops, and an apple core, along with some strawberries that made for a very colorful feeding. Then we added our amendments of worm chow, used coffee grounds, and pulverized eggshell grit. And then finally, after burying the food scraps, we added some shredded cardboard on the top with the paper towel that you saw me take out at the beginning. And let's see if there's any of that food left in here after 31 days since we have been in here. And all I'm really seeing is some avocado shells right here and just a little bit of the shredded cardboard that we had put in here. So over the course of the next couple feedings, as we get them to migrate, they will eat down some of that shredded cardboard we have in here, and we're also going to allow these castings to dry out. And that is important as you're monitoring your worm bins and getting closer and closer to harvest. You really want to pay attention to the moisture and maybe try to feed them less moist food. And if you have a lid or a plastic sheet on top to maintain moisture, maybe think about taking that off just like we did. And here is an item right here that we've been seeing, and I thought that we had broken them all up, but this is a corn cob, and I'm just gonna smash it, and sure enough, right in the middle was a few worms, and it broke up pretty easy. I can't even tell you when we put these corn cobs in. They really last a long time. In fact, what I'm gonna do is take out the worms, and this is gonna go in our migration feeding zone. Now, the next way I harvest my worm bins is through the sifting method, and you can actually use that in any worm bin that you have. And I do have some links for sifters if you want to look at them and maybe buy one individually, but I just use the trays in my vermi hut, and they have 1,600 holes in them. And all you do is you put the castings right inside the tray, and then you can just shake it and the castings will fall through those holes, and what's remaining on top is most of the worms and any kind of big stuff. So one of the things I like about sifting is that your worm bin doesn't have to be completely done and full of just pure castings. You can actually get some castings out of your worm bins before the whole thing is ready. So things are looking good in here, and I think what we're going to do is we are going to set up the migration over here here. So I'm just gonna try and pile everything over here, and we are gonna use some tools in order to get this migration going. And one of the tools we're gonna use is just a simple piece of cardboard that I've poked some holes in here. Got this idea from AV. He has been doing the migration method for years, and I really like seeing him do that in his bin, so I gotta give him lots of credit for that, and we are gonna do that. So this looks like it's a perfect size for it. So let's just kind of push this to the side. Now this is gonna be up a little bit higher than I have had it in the past, just so I can set this up, and I'm gonna get all this stuff from right here over to the side. Lots of kind of damp castings. That's another thing, when you go through and you kind of aerate the bin, you can also help to get some of the moisture that you might find in an older bin that has mostly castings, because the castings do a fantastic job of maintaining moisture. So there we go. We've got our barrier right here, and I'll backfill this down once I get some of the food scraps and bedding on this side. So let's go in with our old stuff, and I'll just kind of shake out this napkin here, paper towel, and set that just like that. And then I've got some very damp shredded cardboard that I'm going to put down on this layer right here, and we'll give them just a little bit more, just like that. So I'm going to hold this in place with my clean hand, I guess, and kind of push this back to kind of level it out, because I do want to have a lot of surface area over here so that it continues to dry out just like that. And as you can see, as I agitate the worms and they have light over them, they do tend to go down, and that's another way that I harvest my worm bins. My Vermi hut consists of a bunch of trays, and what I do when a tray is totally full of castings and ready to be harvested is I put it on the very top, and I just kind of shake up the castings just like this, and the worms dive down into the tray right below them. I do that about 5 or 6 times with about 5 or 6 minutes in between, and I have found it to be the most effective way of getting every single worm out of my castings. Now, I know there's going to be cocoons and that kind of thing, but when I put it into my storage, I can later bait it out and get all those worms out of any castings from any of the methods that I use. So I just put in that old paper towel that we had on the very top, and here are some of the foods that we're going to feed them. And this is a lot. This is more than I typically feed my tiny worm bin, but here we go with some celery. We've got an apple core, and then I've got a bunch of spinach leaves right here. And I'm feeding them a little bit more because none of these worms know that food's over here, and I want them to sense it and make their way over here to all amass right here so that I can pull these castings out with as few worms as possible. So they're going to get those tomatoes along with some strawberries, and I'm just kind of bursting the tomatoes because they really can't get into the center without the skin being broken. And we added a little bit of a banana peel as well. And I'm just going to use this paper towel to clean off my hands. We are going to revisit this paper towel in a couple minutes. But first, let's go in with some worm chow, which I think for this one is just a little bit of cornstarch and some sprinkles for cupcakes that we've had for probably 20 years. And then we'll put in a little bit of used coffee grounds as well. And both of those are just additional food sources for them that is really tiny and is really easy for them to eat. And then we add some grit here as well. This is just pulverized eggshell. They use it in their gizzard to break up the food. So next we'll just add a little bit more shredded cardboard on top right there. Put some over the apple like that as well. And then finally we'll go in with that paper towel that we had. And I'm just going to kind of squish it up right here. So this is how you start the migration method, and the worms are all going to come over here, and then we're going to have our castings that we're going to be able to harvest. We talked about the continuous flow bin that you can use when you have a big bin like the urban worm bag. I showed you how I use the Vermi hut trays in order to sift out our outdoor worm bin. And then finally we talked about the agitation method, which for me is the most effective at getting all the worms out of the castings when I harvest. So the last little tool that I use that I learned from AV in order to get the migration going really well is to use some plastic in order to keep the one side that you have all the frozen food scraps on, and the moisture will kind of evaporate, hit that plastic and go right back down, keeping everything moist, and you keep it off of this area so that it remains dry. Now I've been running this tiny worm bin for 3 years, so if you want to see how I've been doing it, hit that subscribe button. It's free, and give me a like and check out my tiny worm playlist to watch all our adventures. And if you want to see how the last migration of this worm bin did, check out this video right over here. So hope you're having a great day. I hope your worm bins are doing fantastic. So happy vermicomposting, everybody. Take care now.
You squirted that thing all over the place.
All over the, did I? I felt it go up my arm. Did it go? Oh, jeez. Sorry.